Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. If you thought you would get away from adolescence and weirdness, you're not getting away from it this week because we jumped straight from mid-90s into 8th grade. So
Have you noticed there's a pattern with our podcasts like that, where we'll be talking about something and then the next two movies will be of the same nature, and it's weird like that, and it's not planned on any level. This was not planned. We talked about 8th grade a couple of weeks ago, and mid-90s was in the theater, so we wanted to see that and talk about that. But then we didn't really want to go out to the movies this week because of the holiday coming up and schedules, so we wanted to rent something, and it's on Redbox, so we talked about 8th grade. And then you're absolutely right. If you think you're going to get away from, and the strange thing is, a lot of the stuff I was worried about with mid-90s, with the weirdness of young people at that age, we made reference to that movie Kids, who Jonah Hill is a friend of that director, go figure. I was worried about that ickiness you get from that age range and that coming-of-age type story, and it wasn't there in mid-90s. Well, little did I know this little film called 8th Grade was going to come into our life. So I find it ironic, and and welcome back to the ickiness of being in the 8th grade.
I think that Bo Burnham, who's the writer-director of this movie, gets you, kind of jumps in, with both feet right off the bat, and kind of gives you an idea of, this is, for me, I grew up, with computers and things like that. And as I was growing up, the internet started becoming a thing. But I was never a kid when YouTube was around, or when, all of these social things were around. So it is interesting seeing that, and how, kids are still kids, and kids still behave in a lot of the same way. It seems like, if you use this as an example of how kids might act nowadays. But at the same time, there's a modification of their behaviors, and they can, either retreat in certain ways, or become, a heightened version of a certain type of person, whether it's the cool kid, or the kind of like shy and to themselves kid. And the main character of this movie is Kayla Day, but played by the actress Elsie Fisher. So I hadn't seen her in anything. I guess she's done voices in Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2, but I thought she did a great job. And it's one of those performances where, like, I don't feel like I could have seen any other, it felt like it was kind of made for her. Like, since I haven't seen her in anything else, like, I just think of her as, this person. So maybe that's a bad thing for an actor, I guess. But I felt like it was definitely a lived-in character. And it makes me want to think. I listened to some of the podcasts with Bo Burnham on it, and he didn't really get into it very much, but it makes me want to think how scripted that each of those scenes with her talking was, as far as like her stammering and things like that, because it does seem so naturalistic to me. It doesn't seem forced, and it doesn't seem like it's, like a lot of those scenes are scripted. So, I thought she did an amazing job, and that's just kind of the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So you're saying that those, like the video blogs, those are all scripted?
Oh, no, I'm sure the video blogs were scripted. I'm just saying her kind of either interactions with other people, the stammering, the ums, the uhs, the likes, all that stuff. I don't know if this is a, Coen Brothers style script where every stammer and every, ... is specified, or if it's kind of like a, you need to get the, that's not how somebody would actually talk, where she might like kind of like put her own little spin on it, or not. But either way, it was, it felt like a lived-in character. Each of her lines felt, whether they were awkward lines or whether they were her on her blog, of course, but her on her blog, I think she even references a little bit where, when she's recording, or she says, like, she has kind of talking points on a piece of paper, but she's not saying things word for word. She's not reading from a script. The character's not reading from a script. So it does still sound naturalistic how she's speaking to the camera, but it it just, I mean, it seems like it's, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that, this is a middle school girl character written by a 20 something guy, and he was able to at least tap into how the awkwardness that he feels, but it seems like it kind of lined up more with the awkwardness of a middle school girl. So I mean, that just seems crazy to me, but it works.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. The reason why I was asking about that is because if it is all scripted, then whoa, like that's amazing that she's able to do that. If it's not scripted, I don't take anything away from her. It's still a very difficult task to sound believable and as if you are speaking as a normal human being in a situation as if you've never said these things before. That's difficult, even if you're improving the stuff. What I found amazing about especially the video blogs is, first of all, her first one reminded me of myself on this podcast sometimes where I can't put a thought together. And I know what I want to say. And then when I listen back to it, I'm like, that didn't make any sense at all. But you can still tell what I meant and what she means. So, and she does it a lot better than I do it most of the time. But what I thought was interesting about the video blogs is that you could tell that there were talking points as the character she wanted to make. And when she was making those points, it was more as if she was reading it from a script. So that's how it would sound naturally. If she was, she wanted to talk about eye makeup, let's say, and she had this foundation that she liked. She would know already that she wanted to talk about the foundation. So when she would start talking about something that it was premeditated, so it sounded a little bit more stilted, which it would in real life sound like that, versus her just having a conversation with somebody. So I thought that was a really hard thing to do as an actress. How do you sound believable when you have dialogue, and how do you sound believable when you're really saying something to the video camera that isn't necessarily a point that you want to bring up, but then when you want to bring up those points, you do sound kind of robotic in a way. That's a quality I thought was really hard to tap into, and she does it hook, line, and sinker. Absolutely 100%. She's on point. She will go on to do many other things, and that's evident in the first 3 minutes of this movie that there's something special about her, and it's of course probably the reason why she got cast, because she's so believable. She's so real. She looks like the character she's presented to be. They allowed her to have acne, which somebody would have it in the 8th grade. I'm sure that's her, not makeup, which is definitely hard to do, because can you imagine being her age and then seeing this movie on HD TV 10 years from now? And, it's bad enough having acne, period, let alone at this point in your life, let alone being on the big screen, let alone then projecting on a DVD player in HD. The fact that she is not that self-conscious about it is amazing to me. That said, her being self-conscious about it would add to the character development. So it's a win-win situation. So the director did well. He picked somebody who's instantaneously likable but awkward, and you're unnerved by her disposition in the beginning, but at the same time, it reminded me of what it was like to be that age. And I have said it before, and I'll say it again. I would never go back to that age. I would never go back to high school. Never, ever. Not. And people are like, well, what if you know now what you knew then, what you know now? No. I wouldn't. Do I have to be 13 again? Never. And people are like, well, I was so happy in middle school, and high school is the best 4 years of my life. I'm like, great, because you're that person. But I'm her. So there's not a chance in hell. And to actually it's almost should be against the law that we put kids together at that age and expect them to actually function and learn, and why their body is spewing out things that they can't possibly understand, and the situations they get into they can't possibly comprehend because they're not chemically formed. It should be like, oh, you want to stay home today? Okay, I get it. Just call it 8th grade itis. Okay, no problem. Of course, you can't do that. You have to be a functioning adult, and puberty sucks for everybody, but you have to go through it. That said, it's interesting to me that you still have a character and an actress that you like. There are coming of age stories where the character is going through all the things that she's gone through in this movie, but you just don't particularly take to that person because of the character choices or what the screenwriter decides to do. But for this character, she's instantaneously likable, but because she's so relatable, and it has to do with us, everybody having to have gone through that phase. So yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I like the framing device of the YouTube videos, and you know, I at least noticed that he never showed you like how many views that she actually got on any of those videos, and so I think there's a purposeful choice. So you also got to remember, I'm going to step back 1 second, is that, do you know anything about Bo Burnham, the writer director?
I looked up his bio and I recognize some things that he's done, but I don't know that much about him.
He like rose to stardom or fame, I mean YouTube fame, by his first video going viral in 2006, which is like a year after YouTube came out, like a year after YouTube started. So he, from the very kind of beginnings of, you know, video on the internet, like kind of made a name for himself, whether he wanted to or not. And it seems like he's kind of an introverted person, but yet he's making videos that like millions of people, I mean, he had over 1 million views in like a week on YouTube, on his first video on YouTube in 2006. I mean, so it just ballooned for him, and then he ended up like kind of transitioning into you know, stand-up comedy, and a very interesting specific type of stand-up comedy, kind of like meta, you know, stand-up comedy, and integrating music and things. It's really cool. If you haven't seen any of his videos or any of his like stand-up specials, you should definitely go check them out, because they are really I mean, they're really kind of introspective and very kind of pointed at, you know, not only like, you know, I guess he's one of those guys where he's like, I'm going to make you laugh, but I'm also going to tell you that I'm trying to make you laugh. And so it gets kind of like really kind of like snake eating its tail type of a thing. So it's really cool. So starting there and coming at it from giving this movie a framing device of, you know, these YouTube videos where it seems like, you know, her main focus, and the main focus of, you know, all the kids really that you run into, it's about kind of like, you know, confidence and control, and whether it's the lack of confidence or the portrayal of confidence, even though you may not be confident, but definitely control, and the YouTube videos are something that she can control, and it's also something that she can kind of like feel a little bit more mature about. She feels like she's got it all figured out in her YouTube videos, and she's essentially at the beginning of the movie, she's doing the exact opposite of what she's saying in the YouTube videos, and then as the movie progresses, you know, you see how that advances. I thought that was a really cool framing device for the rest of the movie. So yeah, I mean, for his first movie, I think this is the first movie he's ever written. I know it's obviously the first movie he's ever gotten made, but the fact that he's able to use these kind of like devices, I thought it was really cool. The SpongeBob, you know, that gets teased in the movie when they get their 6th grade time capsules, and you see the SpongeBob. You don't even know what it is, but it's like a little SpongeBob thing, and then it comes back later on. I mean, they're able to. He's able to bring things into the movie that are kind of through lines in the movie that work really well as devices for me. So I thought that was really cool. And then characters that are introduced to you throughout the movie, they either, you know, they come back in specific places, and also the use of music on some of those characters, like what was the guy like that she had a big crush on, that like the first time you see him is like this, like, you know, rave music or whatever it was. I thought that was hilarious. Aiden, there you go. And I don't know if it's like, I mean, I don't know, but for me, there were definitely girls that, and Steph started watching this movie with me, and we kind of stopped about 30 minutes in, and she's like, all right, I can't handle this, because she felt so awkward. And I was excited because I wanted to get her opinion on it, you know, because she was a middle school girl. She was an 8th grade girl. So I wanted to get her opinion on it, but she was just like, all right, I can't hang with this. So I was happy that she decided, to at least try. Um, but even after the first 30 minutes, things get a lot weirder, like pretty much right after that. So yeah, I was, she probably wouldn't have been excited about those things, and she probably didn't want to have to relive anything like that. But I mean, for me, I definitely was not a cool kid. I was more of like the Kayla type character. I don't think I tried, as hard, as she was trying to, like, she kind of like tried to go like straight to the top as far as the social strata was concerned, and she had enough guts to do that, whereas I never did even have enough guts to try to like hang out with the cool kids.
Wait a second, though. She's sort of forced into that situation to begin with, though. She tries to opt out of that birthday party many times during that conversation. Tries to be polite,
Yeah.
and obviously that mother who keeps inviting her, of the popular girl, the mother has something for her.
Oh, yeah.
Her dad. There's obviously some kind of weird thing going on, which is totally awkward when you're in the 8th grade period. So she did try to like opt out. She knew her finger quote place in that hierarchy. She knew that those were the popular girls. She wanted to aspire to be. She wanted to aspire to feel cool like them. I'm not so sure she wanted to hang out with them per se, but I mean, obviously, in order to be part of that clique, you would have to hang out with those girls. And then she does make effort, and she tries to make the best of it. But if that mother had never mentioned that party, she would never have gone and or known about it, so she would have never been in that situation. But once she was in that situation, that's where I like the whole idea of, you're right, framing this with the video blogs, showing her. I think the video blogs show us who she really is, and then society has these categories that we have to fit into. So when she's not online, she is the quiet one, because she makes a big point about, I'm not really the quiet one. Yes, I don't talk a lot at school, and I think that's kind of a funny joke there, where she's like, I'm not the quiet one. Okay, I don't talk that much at school. So she actually is showing who she truly is on the inside in the video blog, but of course, because of the hierarchy at school, she doesn't fit into that. My point to that is that when she is invited to this party and forced to go, pretty much, and it's always a pool party, and it's always when the skinny, really good-looking people are hanging around, and you got to come out with your green bathing suit on, and you're just like got that 8th grade baby fat, which the majority of people in the 8th grade have. So it's just that select few who want to have a barbecue. I never understood that. Why do you want to have a barbecue and eat potato chips and hot dogs and then take half of your clothes off and go swimming? It's just not right, unless you look like that popular crowd. Well, anyway, then once she's in that, she goes on her video blog and says, well, you get these chances, you got to make the best of it. So then she tries to find a thoughtful gift, which backfires to a degree. And then she tries to like socialize, which doesn't really work. And then she finds kind of a wallflower character who she hangs out with at the party, which is inevitably what these people usually end up doing. They end up becoming the wallflower and making friends with somebody else. And they're probably either going to date seriously in the future, Gabe and her, or they're going to be best friends for the rest of their life because of that party. So, there's a lot of life lessons here. Stop forcing your children into doing things that they don't really want to do. They know what they don't want to do. If they do, encourage them. But if they don't, listen to what they're saying. Even the mother, when she answers the door, is like, hey, where's your dad? What?
That's the key to that. That's the whole reason that solidifies the reason why she invited. I mean, it wasn't a selfless act for the mom to invite Elsie. It was, or Kayla, sorry. It wasn't a selfless act for that to happen, because she was perfectly selfish in wanting to, at least see the dad. So yeah, I mean, that was the whole reason of it. But I did think it was interesting the way that Bo Burnham shot her moving from that one room by herself, telling her dad to come pick her up, and then how she moved into the main room with everybody. And you got to see her sing on Rock Band, I'm assuming was the game. But you didn't hear her sing, and I think that was definitely purposeful. But it was probably to focus on the act of her putting herself out there, and not necessarily, the fact whether she was, perfect in her intonation and in her, in her specifically in how she was singing, and whether other people were judging how she sounded when she was singing. And you really didn't get too many shots of other people. You got a few shots of other people watching her, but it was mainly the fact that she was actually doing something, and we as an audience weren't supposed to, judge her singing in that moment. We were just supposed to be seeing her putting herself out there and actually, taking a leap of faith into this, these, waters filled with piranhas that happen to be other middle school kids. So, I mean, that was big.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm glad you don't see her sing for a couple of different reasons, because you're right. It's about making the effort, and you see each shot of the characters who are listening to her, and each character in that moment is viewing her exactly how you're expecting them to view. The two popular girls could care less. The two or three guys are kind of paying attention to themselves, but they're kind of paying attention to her, and you can tell she's not doing a bad job. And then you see Gabe, and he's like, yes, she's up there doing it. I'm just glad that the shot didn't end with you actually hearing her at the very last moment and it becoming a thing. I was like, please don't make that this. Please don't make that this. Please, I don't care whether or not she sounded good, bad, or indifferent. The fact that she actually did that is the goal of that scene, in my opinion. So to all of a sudden flip into her vocal and it be flat and out of tune and them laughing about her is something that we've seen a lot of times. So it's not that that couldn't have happened. It's just I'm glad he chose not to do that, because you're right. It's about something else at that moment. And that shot is well done. And also that shot when she comes into the house is well done, because you kind of only see her from like waist down. You don't really see a whole lot of her, and the shot is odd. It's waist level, and then she goes into the bathroom, and you know exactly what is happening in that bathroom. She is trying on that bathing suit, which she's probably tried on 1,000 times before, and she's looking at herself, and she's going, "What am I doing? What am I doing? What I'm doing?" And then she comes out, and you're still at waist level at that point. It's because those moments in life happen, and they're almost completely out of somebody who's 12 or 13 years old's control. And so I think he put it at waist level to make it seem like this is not in her control on any level. And it makes it awkward that it's at this waist level, which makes the whole scene reminiscent of every damn pool party I ever went to when I was in the 8th frickin' grade. So he does a great job at creating a feeling. And I find it interesting, back to something you said about Steph watching it, because you wanted to see because she was an 8th grade female at one point. And what struck me about that is, yeah, that would be an interesting perspective to see what a 30-year-old-ish female thought about watching possibly herself. I mean, depending on where she fell in that, hierarchy of socialization. But at the same time, it's not important that it's a female that's the lead character of this movie. I'm glad it's a female because you get to see a different perspective. But at the same time, the awkwardness and the uncomfortableness that the director wrote in, and the way that he did certain things, it doesn't matter whether or not you're male or female. You felt the same way in 8th grade. And if it wasn't Kayla, then it would have been Kevin. If it wasn't Kevin, then it would have been Krista. It's not important to me per se, because you can relate to this young female regardless of the fact that she's female. And now, granted, she has to go through some different things than guys have to go through, but it's still awkward and unusual. It is good, though, that it's from a young female's perspective, because we don't see that enough, and we need to see. It's getting a lot better, but we need to definitely push that further. So it's not relevant because it's all the same for me, that feeling, but it is nice to see a lead character that you might not necessarily see in something like this.
Yeah, and I think the the formulation of the family is interesting too. It puts in place some roadblocks for the character too, or at least hurdles, I guess, for the character, because we've got an 8th grade girl, and she has. It sounds like from what her dad said that her mom left fairly early on, and in her life. And so she's not able to, or she probably doesn't, it's not that she's not able to, she probably doesn't feel comfortable speaking with her dad about some of the things that are going on in her life. And she probably also feels like her dad couldn't relate with any of those things that are going on in her life because of generational reasons or because of just, gender reasons. Maybe she feels like, well, Dad, you've never been an 8th grade girl, so you have no idea what I'm going through. So right there, the fact that she doesn't have someone directly to speak with about those things or speak about those questions with, and that she doesn't have any really good friends, puts her in a really tough position. And what used to happen, I'm assuming, for young girls or guys in that situation, is that they would kind of at least be forced in a lot of ways to become a part of, to integrate into some sort of like a social group, but of real people. But nowadays, kids have the ability, with the right tools, with access to the internet, essentially, and especially with like a phone, something you have with you all day, they have the ability to integrate into a society, but it's a society of people who are not around them physically, people who are not actually there, and people who may not be who they actually say they are, or who may not have the best of intentions. And it's got to be difficult for young kids nowadays to, it seems like they have to grow up a lot faster, and that they have to deal with things like internet trolls or, bad YouTube comments. I mean, I can't imagine if she had comments turned on her YouTube channels, like some of the horrible things that people could have said to her. Whether it doesn't really matter what the content of your video is. If it's on YouTube, there's going to be people saying bad things about it. So that's just how it is. And the fact that she would have to deal with those things, or just completely being inundated day by day with, other people that she knows from school on Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook, which I didn't really see much Facebook. In fact, I think there was a line in there where it's like, oh, people don't use Facebook, kids don't use Facebook anymore. So yeah, I mean, these kind of curated lives of other people, and it's especially other people that she has seen. It's gotten to the point where it used to be all you would see on television is famous people, and all you would see in movies are famous people, and then everybody else kind of lived their own lives. And now everyone has the capacity and the capabilities to curate a version of themselves in the same way that a famous person would, as far as like controlling the amount and type of photographs or video that people are able to see of them. You have the complete capability to determine, who, I mean, and we've seen movies that go into this a little bit, but this movie really goes into it, as far as her being able to, she's like taking selfie pictures of herself and, like in her backyard with the sun just in the right spot and trying to get just the right angle and all these things, and like deleting one and then trying it again. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it just makes me feel bad that I would hope that kids nowadays don't feel like this, but it seems like kids may feel like they have to have a version of themselves that they show to everyone that is this like approved version of themselves. And they're not actually able to be kids or able to, to grow up in the messy way that people have grown up in the past, and be able to, make mistakes where they're not going to be either called to the carpet for them later on, or, be like, oh, well, when you were in 8th grade, this is what you posted on Instagram. Like, I can't imagine, if I had to be held to task for everything that I, said or did or thought, on a whim when I was in 8th grade, like that's crazy. So, I mean, a lot of it, this movie, I was just like, man, it has to be so difficult to grow up in these times as a kid and still have to navigate all these things. There's so many more things to navigate. And that's one big reason why I'm not really on Facebook and things like that.
I actually have a different take on it. Not a completely different take, but let's go all the way back to the conversation that she can't have with her father because she's an 8th grade female. I don't think she could have that conversation with her mother, because you just are not capable of having a conversation with your parents at that age because, one, you're coming of age and things are happening to you that you think only are happening to you and have only happened to you. And you're right, she doesn't have a core group of friends. She has Instagram, she has Snapchat. For me, what's interesting is I just think there's more of that nowadays. The only thing that you said that I think is different now than when I was growing up is the fact that somebody who has just put out a really cool YouTube video can become famous and make money off of it. But that's no different, really, than the local talent show guy who clogged his way into $1,000, which got him a JCPenney's commercial, which got him a thing on the billboard down the street at Virginia Beach, which made him enough money so he could open up his surf shop down at Virginia Beach. And next thing you know, he's got a club, and he's like this famous local guy because he did all these things and he went to a clogging contest. All of those are kind of true. All of those have happened to people that I know. I just put them all together. So it happens faster and in a more intense way, but I don't think those subjects are any different with or without the internet. I don't think that there might be pressure in a different kind of way, but I don't think there's any more or less pressure than it was when I was growing up. Here's why. Because when you go on Facebook, which us middle-aged people still go on Facebook, there are comments about somebody in the 8th grade that were made when they were in the 8th grade that stuck. And everybody remembers those comments, or everybody remembers that situation that happened to that person. There's a couple of them that I can't really give you examples because they're not really nice, first of all, and I just don't want to play into that. But somebody commented on this person's Facebook page and called her the name they used to call her in 8th grade. So this whole thing that you have to be accountable for what you said when you're in the 8th grade when you grow up is no different than it was when we were growing up. It's just larger. It's just more of it. There's just more things to do. People remember those things, and people have a tendency to classify and quantify and group other people so they can feel better, one, about themselves, and two, about getting through this awkward existence of being 8th grade. So it's no different. Pizza face, whatever the term is when you're, kickball killer is one guy's name because he was so great at kickball. I mean, it's kickball. They still call him that. And he's 53 years old. Yeah, it happened when we were in the 6th grade. And people still refer to him like that. So that whole idea that whatever you say in the 8th grade is going to be with you the rest of your life is really it's just larger now. There's just more of it. Other than that, it's still all the same things. There is just too much pressure on people going through this age range to just fit in general, regardless of Snapchat, regardless of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There's going to be that pressure anyways. That's why this movie is so relatable. It is of its time, this movie, with all the social media, and you're right, her trying to get the perfect picture. But I remember people back in the day ripping up Polaroids and burning Polaroids and what they look like because they didn't, what Polaroids look like when you're burning them with a lighter. I remember that because people would look at that and be like, no, take that again. I don't like that. The only difference is they can do it 100,000 times with their iPhone. Back then, you could only do it 20 times because you only had 20 Polaroid shots. But you still try to get the best picture, the best angle. It's the exact same thing. That's why this movie is relatable to a middle-aged guy or an 8th grade person or a young 30-something-year-old woman. That's why this is relatable, because it's just a difficult time, period. These are just added things that show us how difficult this time is. And maybe that's an optimistic way to look at it, and maybe I don't understand the pressures that young people go through because I am not of that age. But, back to being an actor. You put yourself out there. I just went through a job interview that I was telling you about off podcast, and it was a group job interview, and they were talking about being evaluated. And I was like, I went to private Catholic school, and then I've been in the corporate world most of my life, and then I'm an actor on top of that. I've been evaluated openly my whole life. And so you just either go with it or what? So you go to do a community theater play, you think, wow, all I have to do is try to get this moment right and I'll feel good about it. That's not true, because somebody's going to come up to you and say, hey, I remember you in that play. That moment sucked. Or somebody's going to put it in the paper and say, this could have been better, or this was great, or this was not great. So you're always going to have somebody saying something about what you do in this existence. It's just a million times worse when you're in the 8th grade. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it, but I just think this would happen regardless. If all of our technology blew up tomorrow, these issues would still exist for somebody in this age range. It's just the way that it is. There are a lot more people in the world too than there was 1,000 years ago. So these things are going to be, there's going to be more pressure because there's more people. But, people like Napoleon, he has a reputation of being short, but he wasn't that short for his time frame. But that's the idea that somebody put into people's minds and said it as a joke, and now we're talking about it hundreds of years later as if it was fact. So it happens. I just think this movie does a good reminder that you got to be kind to these young people because it's really difficult.
So we haven't really talked about the dad that much, played by Josh Hamilton, and I felt like he did a really good job of kind of riding the line of cheesy dad, and then also, being there when he needed to be there. But he definitely plays cheesy dad really well. And I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be a single father, specifically of a middle schooler. That's got to be, it's got to be really tough. And so I think that that representation was well done. And the fact that he's trying so hard, like he's not really ever like hard line on her. He doesn't really ever say like, no, you will do this and you will do that. I mean, but at the same time, like she kind of just like, that to me feels like a place where she feels like she might have a little bit of control, where in her interactions with her dad, how she's able to act towards her dad in the same way that the cool girls act towards her. And it gives her that little bitty piece of like, hey, I'm the cool kid here. You don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. I don't have time for you. And so I don't know if she internalizes that or if she sees that. Probably not. But it's a neat kind of like, going straight from a scene with her interacting with the, quote unquote cool girls, and then her, at the dinner table with her dad, or especially when she's going when she's going on that car ride with her dad. She gets invited by the high schooler to the mall, and she's on the car ride with her dad, and it's that shot is a single shot, and it's so cool because you never see the dad, and you don't need to see the dad. That's the great part, is that she's she's like, don't look like that, you're being weird, and then she's like, oh no, now it's worse.
Yeah, that silent, weird look. Stop doing that. She's probably 100% correct. He probably is doing that weird, silent, like,
but he's excited
side-eye
for her
look
because
where
she got she got to go with some friends, and he obviously hasn't. Well, that's the other thing, is that like it's not like he doesn't know when she, if she goes and sees friends or not. He has to drive her everywhere. So he knows exactly what her social life is like. And so when he sees her getting invited somewhere, she plays it down, obviously, but he's so excited, and she, it freaks her out because she's so nervous. She just doesn't want to have to worry about him. She wants to have to like focus on whatever's going to happen when she gets to the mall. And that's the other thing, is that, when I was that age, I spent most of my time worrying about things, like seriously worrying about like other, whether it was, trying to impress other people or, girls or whatever, trying what I'm going to say to the girl at the right time, and going to the dance, and, where I'm going to stand at the dance and all that stuff, like I would just totally obsess about that stuff. And so turns out like it didn't really matter, and it was kind of a waste of a waste of my time, but it was, I don't know, I could have felt a lot like, cooler and calmer if I wouldn't have like totally obsessed about all that stuff. But that was just like me as a kid. So, but that's the other thing about like eighth grade and, for me specifically, I went to like a elementary school and then got dropped, like a small elementary school, and then got dropped into a huge middle school. So it was just kind of like, it was me and like 20 other people that I went to elementary school with. And then like in middle school, it's like 150 people. And so it was a lot all at once. So it was really kind of, stressful to be able to like, oh, now I have to learn, 120 names and figure out, who's what and who does what and everything. But the thing they don't really get into as much in the high school part is that, once you go from middle school to high school, you're able to kind of like break off into factions, and you don't have to necessarily like interact with other factions. And turns out that's kind of what I did. I did the whole like science club, scholar bowl type thing, where I hung out with those people. And then I didn't even really ever see the cool, quote unquote, cool kids in high school. And I went to such a big high school that it was like, there really weren't, there were so many other kids. There wasn't really like a singular, like these 5 kids are the cool kids. It was just, everybody was their own groups, and you just talked to the people you wanted to talk to. And, if you didn't interact with other people, then fine. I graduated with people I'd never said a word to. So it was just, and not because I didn't like them or anything, just because I literally never had a class with them. So it's like, I mean, high school was much, much better for me because I was able to kind of like find the people that I, where I was able to interact with and had commonalities with, and we were able to hang out together. But in middle school, it was just like, there's nothing. You're just like all together, and there's really no other things. You're just like, everybody's slammed together, and you got to deal with it.
Well, I had the polar opposite thing happen to me. I went to a very small private Catholic school up until the 8th grade. So kindergarten through 8th grade was in the same school. And then I went 9th through 12th grade to a very small private Catholic school. I graduated with 180 people, or 130 people actually. So everybody knew everybody. Everybody was up in everybody's business, which brings my point back up about all of these options for socialization now. Twitter, Instagram, all that other stuff. You just made a very valid point where you said, I didn't have to really worry about them because there were so many people in the school. You hung with the people you wanted to hang with, and you didn't really pay attention because you just didn't have any time to have interactions because you didn't have class with them. It's not like you didn't like them. So you don't like their Instagram page. You don't like their Twitter page. You don't like what they like on Facebook, even though nobody uses that nowadays. But for me, it was polar opposite, where you had to, and whose jeans were the coolest was the rage, and who got the car for their 16th birthday changed the hierarchy of the socialization thing. In the end, I think that everybody has that same anxiety that you were talking about, and so worried about so many different things. I luckily got it all the way through high school. Thus, I would never go back there again thing ever. That said, I wanted to bring up a point about the parents and the adults in these movies that we've been watching, mid-90s and now 8th grade. I don't understand what happens to people when they have children. It must be this thing that because you love it so much, this child so much, that you get blurry vision. Like when you see the teacher in 8th grade come out to talk to the people who won best eyes or best or most quiet person, the superlatives, people who won those, and he does that dip thing that the kids do. It's like, dude, you're like, right. See, I don't even know what it's called. My nephews do it all the time. It looks really cool, but I would never attempt to do that because, one, that's not my thing, and I'm not that cool, and I certainly don't want them to think I'm not that cool, so I'm not going to do it. That's what I don't understand about parents and about adults who work with children. They are not there to be taught by you because you're cool. They're there because you have a major in English and a PhD in science. That's why you're there. And that's why they're there. You being the cool teacher only happens when you stick true to yourself. And this whole idea that you have to like talk the language and know the music and understand what people are saying and follow your kid to the mall and watch them like a serial killer? Like, what was he thinking? I mean, as soon as the girl goes, "Oh my God, don't look. There's a guy," I knew it was her dad. And I get it, but how does he not know that's the single worst thing he could do? Especially to somebody who does he not know his kid at all? Like, I don't want to judge because I don't have kids. I don't know how difficult it is. I'm sure that it's just impossible to deal with the anxiety and the worry and the love that you have. It must be just hard enough. But he knows, like you said, he knows her social schedule. He has to take her. He knows that this is a big event. He knows that this is important to her. Why would he think, even going in the mall, even if he had to get a new pair of sneakers, go to Target? Don't go to this mall. Like, don't you remember when you were in 8th grade? I would never have done that, knowing I remember what it was like. Unless I thought that my kid was in jeopardy, or I thought my child was like going down a road. But look what happens with Catherine Waterston in mid-90s when she tries to intervene and pretty much berates those kids about influencing her young child. It doesn't do any good. The opposite happens. They start kind of making fun of her, and she looks like a buffoon, and her son goes crazy on her.
We talked about that, and that's her trying to catch up. You know, she'd already like let go or like not worried about it, and now she's like trying to like catch up and be like good mom now. She's switching from like mom who doesn't care to good mom, and it's like, no, you already, made your bed. You need to lie in it. But her dad in this movie, Kayla's dad, is probably a little bit worried about like who she's hanging out with, because number one, she probably hasn't talked about these people before. And number two, he's, taking her to meet some people at the mall. And there's all these people at the mall, and you don't know, like, you've got a 12-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid who's, going into this huge mass of people, and you might want to like make sure that she's safe. I know it's irrational from a 13-year-old kid's standpoint, but from a parent's standpoint, like doesn't want anything bad to happen to their kid. I can see it. It's not, when you think about it through the multiple layers, and you're like, if there's any chance that my child would ever see me and be embarrassed by me, that's a no-go. But he didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, but what my point is this. They go from 0 to 1,000 without anything in between. Catherine Waterston never sits down and says, and of course you need drama and you need conflict and you need things to propel the narrative in these stories. I'm not naive. I understand that that's why these directors / screenwriters put these moments in. It's a logical absurdity where somebody is just freaked out about their kid and they do stupid things. But what doesn't make any sense to me, and I see it in parents all the time, and once again, this is from me, I probably will never be in this position, but I don't know personally what it would be like. But why do they not sit down and say, hey, so you're hanging out with a bunch of young skater kids. What are they like? Are you doing drugs with them? Why are you, such a young kid, doing drugs with a bunch of skater kids? Who are these kids? Where did they come from? Oh, they have jobs. Oh, they do this. Oh, they do that. Oh, you're going out with these people that you met in high school. What do they do? How was your day? Something other than totally freaking out and embarrassing your son or stalking your child in the mall. Yes, bad things can happen to your child, and I don't want to brush it off because serious bad things have happened to people's children in this existence. I understand that. I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm just trying to say that it's the mall. It's a bunch of kids, and if anything bad is going to happen to your child and you're that concerned that you have to basically stalk them, you could spend your entire existence doing that. So why go 0 to 1,000? There's no in between. And don't they remember being in the 8th grade? Don't they remember what that was like? Don't they remember? My mom was like this. Not a problem. I want to meet their parents and I want to meet them. And this is how she handled it. It was really quite smart. That whole, I'll take if she picks up. I'll pick up if she'll take. So Mrs. Whoever would say, we want to take the kids skating. I'll pick them up at 8 o'clock. And my mom would just be waiting for me. And Mrs. So-and-so, if she was respectable, which is normally how they would be, would come to the door with their kid who was in the same class as me and be like, hey, I'm Johnny's mom, blah, blah, blah. Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. What time are you picking my kids up, blah, blah, blah. And then they would have the same conversation as my mom dropped their kid off later on. My mom usually liked to pick or take and not pick up, but doesn't all parents do that? They don't want to be up till 11, 12 o'clock at night on a Saturday night, God forbid. But then they would have a conversation and they would know. I'm not saying that's going to stop anything bad from happening to your child, but you at least have some kind of beginning. So if something starts to go bad, you can say, hey, if you don't speak to me about this and get this under control, I'm going to talk to Mrs. So-and-so and have a conversation about Johnny and why he's doing this or why you're doing this. This is not a good thing. And on top of that, I'm going to let them both know you can't hang out anymore. There's no like freak out thing where you embarrass your kid. Granted, it's for a dramatic effect in these movies. I get it. But I do ponder that when I see these moments. Why do parents not remember what it's like to be in the 8th grade? How can you possibly forget? So it's
Sure.
Because these movies continuously come out. These coming of age movies continuously come out. And that's why, in retrospect, I'm kind of proud that The Breakfast Club was my favorite movie of all time. At least it just kind of lined up that way, because that movie speaks to those moments. It speaks to those high school moments that were something that you can never forget. And it's done in a very humorous way in that movie somewhat, and it's done in a very dated way in somewhat, and meaning some of the misogynistic and sexual things that are in that movie have come to a different light nowadays, and I understand that too. We live, we learn, we move on. But the janitor in that movie makes more sense than any parent or any teacher that I've seen in any coming-of-age movie that I've watched. It just is interesting to me.
Well, we kind of get that scene between her and the older, the middle school or the high schoolers, and it is interesting how things change so quickly. Did you hear the line in there when one of the guys was like, "Hey, when did you get Snapchat?" She was like, "I don't know, 5th grade." And it's just there's like the generational divide, but it's between people who are like 3 years older than the next people, that because things change so rapidly. The fact that Facebook wasn't even around 15 years ago type of a thing. And same thing with YouTube. YouTube hasn't even been around for 15 years. So, I mean, and now like it's just, it's a constant thing for kids, especially is, they're constantly on YouTube. That's how they're interacting with their world. And not really watching television as much anymore. So in general, so I think that's interesting. But after we get that whole interaction between her and the high school students, which she kind of like is quiet and taking it all in and trying to just kind of fit in the best way she feels possible. She goes home in the same car as the girl that she was shadowing, and then this other guy who was Riley in the movie, and then the girl Olivia gets dropped off. She doesn't want to have Riley and Kayla in the same car together alone, but Kayla says she's okay, and then we get the kind of like that awkward male-female interaction, but it's a real like power dynamic change or power. There's a huge power dynamic in that situation where you have a much older, I don't want to say much older, I guess. I mean, he's 3 years older, but as far as their relationship as of this point, he's a much older guy to her, and he's trying to take advantage of her, and she has the wherewithal to understand what's going on and is willing to, stick up for herself, which is huge in this movie. And I think if nothing else, if girls or, people in general, see this, when they're young, they, this I think will be a good representation of someone who is, confident in their in what they feel and what they're comfortable with, and someone who's able to stick up for themselves and is not kind of like co-opted into a really rough situation and something that they may regret not sticking up for themselves in the future. So I thought that was it's a really awkward scene where he's like, oh, I'll take my shirt off. Now you take your shirt off. And she's ultimately says like, I'm not ready for this. And that's good. I think that's good for people to see. Even though this movie's rated R, hopefully younger people will see it because they either don't care about ratings and are going to BitTorrent it or whatever. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll just see it illegally and move on. But I don't know. I don't even know if movies like this are made for, I don't even know if kids of this age would even sit down and watch a movie like this because of the kind of like YouTube culture where it's like, you're constantly watching 10-minute long videos. I don't know if somebody would sit down and watch hour and a half long movie. Yeah. Well, I don't know, but if they did, it might help them out. So, if they're feeling the same things that this main character's feeling, they can at least feel some sort of like camaraderie with the main character of this movie. But I was kind of expecting a scene like this to happen, but I wasn't expecting it to end up this way. And I think that, that's good. I thought she was gonna, well, you kind of get that teaser earlier in the movie with when she's talking to Aiden and he's very sexually frank with her. And she is taken aback, but not willing to let that opportunity go, opportunity in quotes, the opportunity of at least interacting with him. But, it seems like at that point she's willing to use herself, use her body to get close to him. But ultimately, when the rubber meets the road later on in the movie, she sticks to her guns. So I thought that was great.
Well, that brings me back to my point about knowing your kid. The dad should never follow her to the mall because she's a smart enough young person to know that when she's in the back of a car with a boy, she's going to feel uncomfortable. And it is uncomfortable. She feels uncomfortable and she speaks her mind. It's done in an awkward way. It's done in a subdued way, but she's not budging. And that means that father has done something right, that he has raised a young person up to this point who knows enough about herself that, yes, she can make comments about oral sex and then have to go look it up. And by the way, when she's with the banana in the movie, I was watching it downstairs, and that's the moment my father decided to walk out of the bathroom.
Oh,
and I was
no.
like, so I quickly shut it off and rewound it like I was looking for something in the movie. And he's just kind of looking like, what was that? And I'm like, of all moments to walk in, that's the worst moment ever. And then, of course, her dad in the movie walks in. So a couple of things about this young person and her getting to hang out with high schoolers. Once again, just like in mid-90s, there is the person who comes into your life that represents for the need that you have in your life. And this young, I guess they're 4 years older is what she says, so she's probably a junior in high school, Olivia, Emily Robinson, she comes in and basically goes to bat with the guy on Snapchat and Instagram and, well, you had it before, that's why we're a different generation. She's like, we're not a different generation. She's our generation. And she sticks up for this young person, and she is the voice of reason. Just like in mid-90s, Nicole Smith playing Ray is the voice of reason. And by the way, it's been bugging me since last week. The guy who played fourth grade, his name is Ryder McLaughlin, and I said McLaughlin, and it's just been driving me crazy. It's McLaughlin. I know how to say McLaughlin, so I'm going to say McLaughlin so the guy can have his name represented properly. Nobody else will know what I'm talking about if they don't listen to the last podcast, but it's one of those things that stuck in the back of my mind, and now I was able to rectify it. But the point is that there is always, not always, but mostly in these situations in life, somebody steps in and does the right thing. So it's nice to see somebody who's pretty, attractive, down to earth, socially accepted in high school, bouncy and full of life and basically says, are you nervous? Don't be nervous. I was nervous too. I'm nervous all the time. Don't worry about that. That's just how it is. We're nervous. Let's go. Oh my God, you're so cute. She's just the right person at the right time. And the father should be proud that he raised a young person up to this point that knows the difference. She doesn't go to the mall with the abusive high schooler who gives her a hard time because she just has to be that shadow. That young girl, the main character, Kayla, she knows the difference between somebody who has integrity and somebody who doesn't. And to actually see a conversation with young people debating silly things like she's of a different generation because she had Snapchat when she was born versus we got it later on. And for somebody of that age to go, you're an idiot, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Don't make this young person feel bad because you're an idiot and having a conversation about something that is so superficial. It's not even worth me taking the time. Shut up is basically what she says. As for the car sequence, there is those moments in these movies that makes me hesitate wanting to see these movies. And we talked about this in mid-90s, and I brought it up at the beginning of the podcast. And what I find intriguing about that scene or perplexing about that scene is that, yes, we're talking about a young lady who has enough confidence somewhere inside her to say, I'm not comfortable with that. But why are we not telling young men, that's not okay, dude? And it's not that it's not okay. It's that what he says to her later on is what's not okay.
Yeah.
Yes, him wanting to okay, the difference between an 8th grader and a senior in high school are decades of difference when you're that age. When you look back on it, if you dated somebody who's 4 years older or younger than you are now, it's no big deal because it's just not that, things don't progress that. When you go from 8th grade to senior year, you've progressed enormously. So it is a little icky that he's older than her, but age appropriate to a degree. Him wanting to sexualize the situation, okay, yeah, I can understand that. That's what young people want to explore. They want to get to know what's happening in their life. And if they can, find common ground with somebody and have some kind of sexual experience that seems to be, even though they're underage, consensual, because let's face it, they do. And to not think that people that age aren't sexual is ridiculous. And you're not looking at the point again of people's lives. You just are. You are sexual at a certain age.
But the power dynamic is so imbalanced.
Right. And I would not fault him for that because he's not aware of that on some level. It's when he's driving her home and he says the thing about, I was just trying to help you out. By the first time you get together with somebody, you'll be experiencing, now you don't have that moment because you screwed it up. That's rape culture thoughts.
And that's him trying to feel better about himself by putting her down. He's got to feel that internally that what he was doing was wrong, and he's got to it seems like, and he's trying to talk himself out of feeling bad by saying oh, I was trying to help you.
I think you're giving him way more credit than he deserves at that moment. I think he's mad that he didn't get some kind of sexual experience and now he's being sour grapes. He's being defensive over it. I don't think that he's feeling bad about trying that at all. I think he's feeling bad about it not working.
Sure.
That he didn't get some kind of sexualization. I don't think he has a clue that there's a power structure that he's taking advantage of.
No, but he doesn't care about her. But what he's telling her is he does care about her. He has a singular focus. And then he's trying to tell her oh, I was only doing this for you. And it's no, of course not. But that's him trying to talk himself out of oh, well, I'm just a, skis ball.
No, I don't even think he thinks that far. I think he's disappointed he didn't get any kind of sexual experience. I don't think he's trying to talk himself out of being a skis ball.
That's why I think it's subconsciously maybe is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That could be subtext. But, when he says that, I'm trying to do that. No, dude, that's called rape. So you need to get a grasp of that. And you said something at the end of what you were just talking about would people of this age see this movie? Of course, if they want to, they can, access it anytime. They just get a hold of their Amazon Prime ID from their parents. I mean, password from their parents, which everybody probably knows anyway in the family. Big deal.
Oh, they just pirate it.
Or pirate it or whatever, or get it downloaded from a friend. Who knows? If they wanted to, they could. That definitely brings me to a conversation closer to the end of the podcast we might have, or we can have it now.
Sure.
Who was this movie really made for? My point is that if that young man could see himself on the screen, then he would have thoughts of how I kind of am a skis-ball and I shouldn't have done those kind of things. If he sees himself reflected, if we make it unacceptable in our culture that men should be doing that even at that age, which we are now making a huge thing out of because it needs to be. So the director and screenwriter, same person, was smart to put that in there because instead of making a judgment statement about that young man, he shows the actions of this young man, which now will be reflected in other people's eyes, be it a father who needs to teach his son not to do that kind of dumbass stuff, or a society or a teacher or an 8th grade boy or somebody. You can't point your finger at people and get on your soapbox and say, don't do this, don't do that. You have to represent. And so I'm wondering, who was this movie made for? Because at first it didn't appeal to me for a lot of reasons that I've already stated. I don't ever want to go back to 8th grade, nor do I want to watch a movie about people going back to the 8th grade. And when I came out of it, I thought, okay, it's exactly what I expected on some level, and I'm glad that I saw it, but the movie doesn't call to me personally, and I don't think it has to do with the fact that I am 4 decades away from being that age. I think it has to do with there's an aspect of this film, in my opinion, that's missing. There's a universal theme of this movie that wasn't presented large enough to stick out to me. And that's probably on purpose, and it's probably a choice. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying for me personally, here's an example. Every time I see a young kid on a skateboard now, I instantaneously flash back to mid-90s and think about what I was feeling during that movie. I'm sure if I go to elementary school and see a bunch of people in 8th grade, I'll flash back to this movie. But what was the initial point and who was this movie for is more perplexing to me than actually pondering about the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that I did listen to a podcast, I think it was the Filmstruck podcast, that had Bo Burnham on and interviewed him. And he said that he didn't really necessarily set out to write a movie about an 8th grade girl, but he did want to write about a character who represented the anxieties that he feels daily. And as he kept, thinking about it and developing his feelings about like what kind of a screenplay he wanted to write, it seemed to kind of codify in that character in an 8th grade girl. So, that's, all those anxieties that he's putting on the page are his, but they are, represented in this narrative by that 8th grade girl. So, I mean,
and I wish I don't wish I had known that, but I wish I had seen that correlation to relating to that, because I get it. I get the nervousness and the anxiety. I have that as a human being too. And the putting yourself out there and not sure what people are going to say about you. I've been kind of lucky. I have mostly positive feedback coming back most of the time. And, the negative, I actually believe myself. So I try to improve upon that and learn from that. And it's not easy being a human being. I just wish that I had seen that or felt that as an audience member in this film. This film seemed laser focused on this particular character at this particular time. It didn't seem to have a larger, more universal theme, which is what I said just earlier. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's a good thing. maybe that's a good thing. Maybe being very specific about a character and very specific about a time frame. And by the way, speaking of the music, I find it interesting that everything still sounds like 80s techno music, even in movies in 2018. Everything sounds like Kraftwerk and Devo and Yellow Magic Orchestra and all that stuff that I grew up with still has a tendency to find its way into movies of coming of age movies. Morrissey was in mid 90s.
But that's popular music now, though. I mean, if you look at a lot of the music that's coming out now, the synth type music is still is popular again. So it's a cyclical type thing. But I see what you're saying, and I think that if we look at it from a classical character arc, I feel like it is a complete arc from beginning to end for this character. So when you look at a more formal character study, I think that he checks all the boxes, really. I mean, you have a character going through different events, different experiences, and they are definitely changed from the beginning of this movie to the end. The cool part about it is that the tone of those YouTube videos is consistent throughout the movie, from the very beginning, the first word that she says in the movie to the last thing that she says, the last kind of like YouTube, her final YouTube video by the end of the movie. Even though the tone is the same and the content may be very similar, the fact that at the beginning of the movie that she's not living that, and by the end of the movie she is living that, that's really cool to me, that we see this character change.
And I'm not saying that I'm not necessarily criticizing the filmmaker for having a laser focus on this character. I just personally didn't get that, and it could be some kind of defense that I have up against this time frame, or some kind of moment where I was, there's a whole subjective way to go see movies where you're not ever clearly objective. We've talked about this a million times. So it could be that and it doesn't necessarily have to have a universal theme. And I love the fact that you've explored some podcasts with this director, and he said that it is his anxiety. It just came out this way. I love that. I just wish I had felt more of that. And by the way, side note, you do see a shot of her looking at her videos online, and you do see how many people have downloaded or how many views there are. And it's usually 1 or 2 per video. And I'm assuming that, and it's a real quick shot, but it's there. I'm assuming it's not prominent. I don't think you're supposed to be focused on how many views she has. I think you're supposed to be focused on the fact that she's looking back on her own videos at that point. And you're right. It is a full character arc. There is a beginning, middle, and end to this character. And she is a changed and evolved person at the end. And that's why I like the whole idea of talking to yourself in the 6th grade, and that SpongeBob zip drive comes back. And then thinking it's so ridiculous when you're in the 8th grade, because it's like 2 years before, like you're not going to remember what you said to yourself. But at that time frame, that's a long time. And then for her to actually kind of comment on it, that this is kind of stupid, and then burn her 6th grade memories. But yet that's exactly what she does in the 8th grade, to talk to herself when she graduates from high school. And when she graduates from high school, she's going to really appreciate that moment that she talked to herself. I think that, and this is something I took from it, and might not be the truth, but since it's only 1 or 2 viewers of her videos, I think it's that guy Gabe and her. She's watched her own videos, and he's also watched them once too, because he says, I've watched most of your videos. And so I'm sure that's just a small detail. I don't even know if they meant that to be that way, but that's what I assumed. And that's actually a really lovely scene too, to go back a little bit, is when she has her first real date. Going over to Gabe's house, who's as nervous as she is. And that's a repetitive thing that characters say in this movie. She says it a lot. The 8th grade, or the freshman girl says, or the high school young lady says it. Then Gabe says it, and she says it again in that scene. And the chicken McNuggets might not be warm because, like, I didn't.
Love it.
I loved it.
Too. See, I would be that guy.
Yeah,
like, I would totally be
great.
That guy. Like, constantly checking in.
Yeah, how could you not fall in love with that kid? He's just like really himself. And that is what I think I took from this movie, and maybe that is the universal theme that I should be taking from it. Maybe I answered my own questions in the fact that you just have to really, it's hard. And she talks about this in the movie too, about being yourself, being true to yourself. But she also talks about when you go to a pool party, that's yourself at the pool party. So it might not be the same thing as when you're home on your YouTube videos, or it might not be when you're at the mall with a high school student. You're complex. You're a complex human being, which is actually a complex thought for somebody who's 12 or 13 years old to realize that their personality alters depending on what situation they're in. And that's also a really good statement that the filmmaker makes, because when you're that age, and for the rest of your life, actually, people have a tendency to act appropriately depending on the situation. And of course, there are things in society where you have to act certain ways. You don't go into church, just start cussing. You just don't. But you don't alter your personality and start believing in God if you're an atheist when you go to church. You still are an atheist. You're just going to church to experience the experience. But your personality does have to alter to absorb that experience, and that's not a bad thing. So maybe there are a lot more universal themes than I was willing to. Maybe I should have held that thought and thought about it a little bit later and then answered my own question, because I think I just did.
Full circle. It's a full journey.
Full circle. I have a character arc from somebody being a doubting Thomas to universal theme understood.
See, and I didn't even have to do anything. I just stood here or sat here, No big deal.
Story of my life, my friend. I'll just talk until I figure it out.
So, yeah, I mean, I did. I mean, I was going to say I did enjoy this movie, but I don't know. I think that I appreciated this movie, and I think that it would be cool. The problem is that like for it to really be effective, you need to like kids need to just like stumble across this movie, as opposed to like parents sitting their kids down and saying like, you really need to watch this movie, because they immediately are going to just shut off.
Well, that's the worst thing. As a matter of fact, the only people that should be told to watch this movie are parents. And then let the kid experience it when they can. But to actually sit down your young adult and say, you need to watch this movie, you're going to learn something, the opposite's going to happen. Don't do that. Oh my God, I would freak out if my parents made me watch this movie.
Yeah, that's bad news. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think maybe that'll help parents not like creep on their kids at the mall. I don't know, but
fingers crossed.
Yeah. So hopefully it will also get people to see some of Bo Burnham's stand up, because I mean, he's got a lot of fans. He's fine. I'm not worried about him. But like, since you haven't seen any of Bo Burnham's stuff, I think he's definitely got stuff on YouTube. So just go on YouTube, look him up, and you'll see, I think he's got multiple stand-up specials on there, plus all of his old videos where he kind of like plays piano and, sings and stuff, and has kind of like, kind of meta type songs. And I really appreciate that kind of stuff. So you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. And you can also tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.